Greetings. I am Dorothy Dowling, Principal of DEI Advisors. We are a non-profit organization dedicated to personal empowerment. I am truly delighted today to welcome Lauri Reishus, President and CEO at Airlines Reporting Corporation, also known as ARC. Lauri, welcome. It is such an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Dorothy. I'm pleased to be here.
Lauri, your remarkable career progression from a business leader in a travel management company space and then actually to move on in your journey to lead ARC is truly inspiring. I'm wondering if you would be willing to elaborate on your career journey and share it with our audience.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I started in this amazing travel industry at American Airlines in reservations, and it was not my intention to join the travel industry at the time. It was just a job. But I ended up really falling in love with the business. And yet I found myself not personally able to continue to work at American Airlines because I had very low seniority. I'm working at a res center, and I was the single mother of two young boys at the time. So as I started to explore my options, I became aware that I could become a travel agent. I didn't really know that I could become a travel agent, but I realized that I could. So I went and got a job at a travel agency, a corporate agency. And all I did in the first year or so was send prepaid tickets. If you have been around as long as we have, you know what that is. No one knows what that is anymore. But anyway, I got really involved in the travel agency business and enjoyed it immensely and moved into different roles. And then I had the very good fortune to meet Mike Primo. And when he left the agency that we both worked at and went to go lead Sato Travel, which is an airline owned travel company, he offered me a position and I came along. This has been an interesting part of my career. Is almost all of my career I've worked for airline owned companies. Almost 20 years with Sato Travel, which handled military and government travel and then eventually got into corporate travel as an airline owned company. And then here at ARC, that remains an airline owned company. So many years at Sato Travel, again, different roles, took on marketing, operations, customer success. We called it account management back then, sales support, and ultimately became like the VP of global accounts at Sato Travel, which was acquired by Navigant. And then ARC came calling, and I left to go to ARC, and I was hired by ARC because travel agents are a really important part of the customer community at ARC, and yet nobody really at ARC had ever worked at an agency, and they wanted to develop a data business, develop more services and for both agencies and airlines. So they brought me over as a general manager, and I subsequently became the COO and then became the CEO elect successor. And here I am the CEO now for going on 3 years.
That's an amazing story. And I know you spoke about Mike Primo, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing any stories about mentors or allies and how they helped shape your career.
Mike was a part of my career for many years because he ultimately joined me at ARC and became the CEO, as I said. But I think from one of the things I will say about Mike, and I think if you can find someone like this in your professional career, you'll be a very fortunate person. Not just a mentor, but really an advocate. And an advocate in the sense of give her this opportunity. Maybe she's never led a marketing group before, but she can do it. Let her do it. He would mentor from that kind of coaching perspective, but really he would just throw me into the deep end of the pool when we needed different things done. And I I knew I could always go to him for advice and guidance, but really just was a strong advocate. And I think everybody needs both mentors, someone that can help you be a trusted advisor, give you coaching, but you also will benefit greatly if you can find someone who will give you new opportunities or advocate for you to have that opportunity.
I know some of our DEI advisors have actually emphasized that point, Lauri, in that sometimes the individuals in their lives that were so transformational in their career journey, they saw things in them that,
Hmm.
quite frankly, they didn't necessarily see in themselves.
Hmm.
And having someone really support you in terms of taking some of those career risks and investing in
Hmm.
that career journey was really instrumental. So it sounds like Mike was very much that person in your life. And I can understand why. I mean, your journey is quite amazing and just the success that you've had over time. I can see why he saw all of those great qualities in you.
I remember, I'll tell you this really short story. We needed a head of marketing at Sato Travel. The internet was started and there was, excuse me, Ark and Sato, I get sometimes, Sato was now going to leave, not just focus on military and government, but go after big corporate accounts. That was an opportunity for growth for Sato Travel, and we needed marketing in that case. And I remember him coming to me saying, "I need you to go over there and lead the marketing group." And I'm like, "Mike, I don't know. I don't even know the different fonts. I don't know anything about marketing." And he said, "Our business. You got people there that know that they're great writers and graphic designers, and we have a webmaster, but they need someone who can tell them how to connect to our customers, what our customers care about the business." So it's just kind of my favorite example of him giving me a nudge or a push in a direction that he knew I could do it. I had my doubts, but I ended up loving it.
And I think that true appreciation of customers, that truly, I think, empowers CPOs in a very special way because they should be shaping
Hmm.
business leadership. And so I'm sure that affinity you have in terms of understanding this has really helped shape all of the businesses that you've been involved with.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if we can just move a little bit in terms of advice you might give to others who are earlier in their career and some of the key success factors that really powered your commercial and business leadership growth.
Absolutely. It is a journey in a career, and what you need when you're younger in your career or earlier is sometimes different depending on as your roles progress. So if I think about advice for people earlier in their career, and that might mean you've not been in a leadership role yet. I my best advice at that stage of your career is to be hugely focused on learning, understand what the business that you work at is trying to achieve, not just what they do today, but where do they want to head? What's their aspirations as an organization? And if you get clear around that, then you can keep your eyes open for opportunities to be of assistance. And that may not be quite yet a new role, but maybe there's a project that needs people to help it with, or an event that needs volunteers, or just look for opportunities to help others. This is my favorite advice to people who want to, like, how do I get into leadership? You get into leadership it's hard. Sometimes it's hard when you haven't been a leader to get that opportunity, but the way I've seen it work for myself and for many others is if you become that person that people rely on. You've helped them, you understand what they're trying to do, you're willing to give above and beyond what's basically required of your job. That's like natural leadership. You'll get the opportunity to lead if you are already being viewed as a natural leader. And so early in the career, I think it's really around that. Look for opportunities to learn and grow and help others, become a leader. And then you have this period of time where you're still probably doing a lot of the day-to-day work of the function that you're in, but also leading it. So at that phase, you have to really focus on becoming a good leader, learning to help others be successful was very different than just doing it yourself, because the classic experience for most of us is that people can be very successful doing things differently than you do it, and letting go of it has to be done kind of the way I did it, and learning to really work with others in all of their various styles and approaches, and yet getting the results that everyone's looking for. That's a really interesting phase, and I think that's a phase in your career where you probably need a lot of support, training, coaches. Leadership isn't easy. We've all seen it done well, and we've seen it done really poorly, and you'll cap out if you don't learn to do it well. And so that's my early in career advice. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Dorothy, if you want me to
Well,
expand on anything.
and I think that those are really powerful ideas in terms of advice, Laura, because I do think that transition, and if we think about McKinsey just released the latest study in terms of where women sit in the labor force and that broken rung that they
Mhm.
talk about is truly the gap analysis that seems to be holding a lot of the
Mhm.
actual metrics for women to actually move their careers along. And that element of moving into that people leadership role and helping others be successful and truly understanding that journey and getting all the right support as you
Mhm.
have identified, because I do fundamentally believe that is a difficult transition.
Mhm.
And a lot of people think it just is a natural kind of development that we
Yeah.
all have, but it truly is not. So
Mhm.
I think promotions who actually identify that they want more formal training and coaching, etc. To be
Mhm.
successful is important for everyone to hear.
I want to, if I might just add
Yeah,
a little bit, because I'm preparing for this conversation. I was thinking a lot about the past 3 decades, and I want to balance my advice about helping others as a way of almost learning and earning new opportunities with making sure you're taking care of yourself and not getting taken advantage of, because there's a balancing act there, right? If you lean too much into that, there are plenty of people who will take credit for all of your hard work, and you'll be looking around going, what's happening for me? So there are different inflection points where you have to pivot from focusing on others and helping others be successful to making sure people know what you're doing, what you've achieved. And because there's, I just, and make sure you're thinking about that consciously along the way. And if you start to feel a little bit like resentful, you probably let it go too far. So that would be my piece of advice for folks, to make sure you're really thinking about it consciously and not letting things just take you down a path too long in that sort of helper
well,
learning mode. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's a really important balance that you're talking about, Lori. And I'm wondering if we could expand on that because I'm wondering you have been a team leader of a lot of people and you do a lot of good work at ARC in terms of the kind of development that you offer to your teammates, including interns. But I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit on some of the ways that you have really focused in on making sure that the kind of contributions that you are bringing to the table are being recognized, as well as how you have really approached your team leadership responsibilities at ARC.
Yeah, I'll speak to the former first, and then I want to talk about team leadership. But I had a I remember having a very large aha moment, and it was in a situation in which I was actually having pretty serious conflict with with a peer, another executive at ARC, and he said something to me. And sometimes the best learning, sometimes you learn some really important things from people you may not necessarily even really that much. So I think that's an interesting thing that I learned in that interaction. But he basically told me, you do a really crappy job helping people understand what's happening in your area and what you're doing. You really don't know how to, you just think if you work hard, everything good is going to come. And it was true. It was painful to hear, but I just say that you have to make sure that your teams, I'm a big fan of make sure you give lots of recognition to the team. None of us do this alone, but you have to also make sure you're communicating internally and externally in a way that allows people to understand what you've contributed and what your team is contributing. So I just thought it was an interesting experience for me, because I that would be the trap that I've fallen into a few times in my career. Just of course, if I should just assuming that I would get recognized and rewarded for all of these efforts and accomplishments. So you got to tell people. It's almost like an internal, it's like a, now we talk about having a personal brand. We never used that language before, but you really do have one, and paying attention to that's important. In terms of team development, I think, for example, we have a very robust internship program. And what I've seen, in fact, we just hired a couple of our interns from this class. Giving people need lots of, you have to pay attention. You have to make time for people, regardless of where they are in their career. You have got to make time for people to, but when people are earlier in their career, they may need, you have to think about situational leadership. Like, where are they in their career? And you've got to, as a leader, you have to modify your approach for that. So for an intern, for example, they are just learning about this industry. They have such a hunger for information, and you really got to spend time explaining this crazy, complex industry that we work in. And if you don't make time for that, you're really impairing their ability to contribute as quickly as they want to, and it creates I think a frustration gap for people. So I try to remember, where are people at? If they're new they may have been in the company for 10 years, but if they just got a promotion, they're almost back to square one in terms of learning. So I try to remember that and give people the time that they need. I just find that as people evolve in their career, where I might have been much more directive, as this is what we need you to do. This is, let's talk about how you do it. That's very like level one, to how can I help you? When people have mastery of a role, then they're just looking for maybe some guidance and support. So it's being really mindful of where people are at and trying to tailor your approach to with that awareness. And I find that works, frankly, for an intern all the way to when I just promoted recently someone to an executive role, but new in that role. They're in a very early learning stage. You can't just assume that they know how to go about doing what you want them to do.
If I may, Laura, I just think your brilliance in terms of this situational leadership and being so sensitive to your teammates. I know we spoke about it with your internship program and how you had to balance that with your other teammates because they were getting to do things that many were interested in.
Yeah.
But I just think your sensitivity in terms of understanding others' careers journeys and just being an advocate for them and truly helping them in terms of their success rate. I do think it speaks to your understanding of customers and how you made teammates customers too.
Yep.
So
It's always
there's,
about the people.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, you've done some amazing things, and I do think your internship program is something that many in the industry could learn from because you have done a really good job at really focusing on that next generation of leaders.
I am so amazed by interns. Or I just this week spoke to some of the folks that we've recently hired, and a number of them were earlier in their career. It is so exciting what they've got such a global perspective. It's just innate. They're their technology savviness just blows me away. We had an intern program that they did in about 6 weeks. What an amazing project with AI, for example, and they was like easy. So it's just so it's reassuring and exciting to see the newer people come into the industry, and I love being around them. I think it's a lot of fun, and it makes you feel really good about the future.
I think the other part that I loved when you told me that story was that their passion, energy, positivity, drive, all of those things was very contagious in your organization.
Oh,
So
it is.
all of your teammates up.
Yeah. One of the unintended consequences of COVID for us is we've really rebuilt ARC. ARC has a very tenured senior team. And when COVID happened, we did an early retirement. We basically reduced our workforce by 25%. And now that we've rebuilt the team, we've hired a third of the people at ARC, one third have been with us for 2 years or less. So it's a huge infusion of new talent and energy and ideas. And most people are not from the industry, so that brings amazing perspectives. And so it's been you know, I don't like the way that it had to happen, but in a way it's given ARC like new life for the future. It's really exciting.
That's an amazing framework I think that we can all take away in terms of looking at how some of the positives of COVID have
Mhm.
created a real cultural impact in your organization.
Absolutely.
So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing. I'm wondering if I can go back and I hear a thread in terms of your personal mantra that in terms of how you really think about your approach to business, your partners, and obviously your team. But I'm wondering if you could articulate that for us.
I do have one, and it's a big poster on my wall. Somebody came along and found it for me, but it's one I've used for a long time, and it is a double-edged sword. But I still believe in it very deeply. That you work hard and be nice to people. Work hard and be nice to people. And I hold on to the work hard piece because I believe leaders should work harder than anyone else on the team. It's not sometimes we've all seen the opposite, right? Somehow times people get to a more senior role and somehow everybody else is working, but they I don't know, they do their thing. But I really believe that you shouldn't ask people to work any harder than you do yourself. And I have a Midwest background, so maybe that's just that work ethic. But good things happen when you put your shoulder to the wheel and really work hard. And then the being nice to people is just maybe it's that customer background. I grew up in customer service. My best friends actually are people I've met in the industry or used to be colleagues or currently colleagues. I just care a lot about the relationships. I think I'm a relationship first leader. That doesn't mean that I haven't learned over time how to manage that appropriately. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made and all of that. But the best stuff happens when people are bringing their best into the situation. And the culture of the company is very much at ARC has been around great people trying to do great work together. And to me, it makes life sweet. And we spend a lot more hours in our life at our job than we do sometimes outside of the work. So that's for me, my mantra. Mhm.
And I think there's really good lessons for all of us in that, Lauri. I share that perspective that hard work and the learning that comes through that is very empowering for people in terms of their career development. But likability and being thoughtful to others, I think, helps others want to work for you. And I do think as a leader, those are important characteristics that we all have to keep in mind.
Yeah, Dorothy, I think that's really important because higher the level in the organization that you get, the less you're actually doing the work and the less you're actually directly impacting your customers and your products, and which all of that's going to flow to the bottom line. And so you have got to build a team of people that are doing great work, and you have to y- you're not going to get that if you're not treating people well. It's just human nature. I'm sure there's situations where people put up with bad bosses because for whatever reason. I don't think that's the world we're in anymore. People have lots of choices, and I think if you want to attract talent to your team and retain that talent, you've got to treat people respectfully and well.
And I think everyone talks about the discretionary time that talented people give to their employers, that you have to earn that. They have
Right.
to. I just commend you again because the sense of your commitment to people. I know why you have built such a powerful team, and you have such loyal teammates that continue to support you and ARC.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we can move on a little bit about learning, because you've had an amazing career, and you talked about starting out as a single parent and the journey and choices that you've had to make. But this element of continuous learning and growth has been noted by many of the advisors who have participated in your interviews. And I'm just wondering, as you have gone through your journey, if there have been any go-to development, like books, newsletters,
hmm
courses, different things that you have
hmm
invested that have really been important to your personal development.
I mean, there are so many sources of a voracious reader, and I think that actually has been really helpful to my career. And you can pick up ideas reading a biography of a historical figure as much as you can a business publication, for example. But I am really a big fan of Harvard Business Review. I think they have really well researched, interesting articles. Every issue I get some idea and probably make my team crazy. Hey, we should check this out, or we should do this, or why aren't we doing that? So I'm a big fan of HBR. I recently started following chief.com for women. They have great articles. And then chiefexecutive.net is another really great. I didn't really discover them until I got into this role. I'm not quite sure why that happened, but I'm forwarding stuff all the time because, and anybody can sign up for their newsletters. Really thoughtful, very timely, interesting little articles that will give you lots of interesting insights. So those are some of mine. I'm a big fan of The Beat and the company Dime. So within our world, there's so much to read, but those are usually, I don't let those get too stale. I did, in preparing for this role, have a more formal development plan with formal learning. For example, NACD, National Association of Corporate Directors. I'm certified as a corporate director, so there was quite a rigorous amount of learning related to that, which has served me really well in this job. And I did take a 1 week class at Wharton around strategic planning, for executives. I would say a big miss for me on my development plan was I should have learned more about mergers and acquisitions. That's never been part of my background. I never worked for a company that acquired anybody else or merged with anybody else. And yet here at ARC, we do have investments in other organizations, and we've had some of those hit various events. And so that's been an area that I wish I had learned more about. And so I would advise anyone getting into this role, be sure you're sharp on mergers and acquisitions in addition to strategic planning. That one served me well. So those are highlights that come to mind, Dorothy.
Those are all great tools. I share some of your passion for some of those publications. HBR is a big tool for me as well. But I do think that balance of actually investing in some formal education is also really good for our audience to hear, Laura, because I do think sometimes taking time away from work and being in one of those leadership development programs really allows you to go back and focus in on skill, experience, and then to internalize some of those things.
One other thing that I might mention is when I joined ARC, it was after almost 20 years at a TMC. I knew obviously about ARC, um, but what I didn't realize when I got to ARC almost like 18 years ago, that there was an enormous amount of conflict between the travel agency community and the airlines that owned ARC. That just wasn't on my radar when I worked at a TMC. And so I took a conflict resolution course, an 18-hour class at a local university and it was fascinating because half the people in there working for the UN or they're army captains. But here I am trying to figure out how can I help ARC grow when the two core constituencies, airlines and agencies, are like hate themselves, hate each other, and they are mad at ARC because we're not doing something to the other group. So it was fascinating. I learned some really great leadership skills just around because conflict is just a human thing, right? It happens all the time. And everything from how to facilitate, how to find shared wins, how to it, show two different groups true respect and value each group for what they bring. It was if anybody's in a situation where that rings a bell, I would say there are some really interesting like mediation and conflict resolution courses you can take. And you may be the only business person in the room thinking you're not trying to become a mediator and help people who are divorcing come to an amiable settlement, but it's still the same tools and the same mindset and approach to the problems that humans are having with each other. So that's the one I would add.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing suggestion, Lori, because I do think in all our domains and in the business world, we all have to navigate conflict
Hmm.
and hopefully bring things to a positive outcome. So that's a really good tip. I wonder if we can move on because ARC is quite a complicated business model. It's really important to the airline community, of course, and it's a real data connector across the
Hmm.
travel ecosystem. And I know you talked about building alignment, but I know we've also talked about just the governance, the level of
Hmm.
governance with the nature of the stakeholders that you have to continue to evolve your strategies in terms of all of the shared approaches that you have from your business model. So I'm wondering if there's any tips that you could offer in terms of how you navigated all of that stakeholder
Hmm.
engagement, management, leadership.
Kind of building on my comment about the conflict resolution, we've navigated this well at ARC by really ensuring that all the people, the processes at ARC, our priorities are attentive to both the airlines and the agency community. And we, in some cases, had to make some shifts. And then we looked for places where we, ARC, could actually add true value. It's not our job to just tell people, hey, you should get along. We have to actually do things that help them both succeed or both achieve their respective objectives, dealing with different constituencies. From a governance perspective, we do have very formal agreements with agencies and airlines, and but yet we have learned that the stronger you make your relationships, which has been a huge focus over the last many years, the less you have to be guided by agreements and the more you are guided by shared shared objectives. And agreements can be modified. Agreements are not carved in stone like the tablets. They can be modified to reflect new realities if people want them to be. And that starts with the relationship and the understanding of what's getting in the way or what people want to achieve. So again, it comes full circle for me. You build great relationships, you can usually navigate through any challenging times, and you can help people get the outcomes that they're looking for. And a lot of that's ARC's job in many ways is to help airlines and agencies be successful. Like it doesn't show always on our bottom line, but that's actually as an industry owned entity, we exist to try to create value for the participants at ARC.
I think, again, your discussion of that shared sense of purpose and the relationship engagement, I loved the comment that you made about the difference between agreements and a shared sense of outcomes and how to really build that level of commitment to each other so they can get to the right business outcome. I think that's really good advice. And I think for organizations that have an awful lot of infrastructure and governance, we could all learn from you in regards to that.
Thank you.
I wonder if I can move on to just you personally, Lauri, because you're a trailblazer. I think you're the first woman who's ever held this role.
Yep.
And I fundamentally believe you probably had to work on really building your candidacy consideration. I think all
I
women
did.
are faced with that challenge because you're actually changing people's points of view of a woman actually holding that role. So I'm just wondering if there's anything you can share in terms of how you really developed your consideration among the various decision makers and seeing you as a successor to that role when the opportunity presented itself.
Thanks for that question. First, I had to decide that I wanted it myself. And that was actually an interesting process for me. I've never been a person who's focused on what's next. I'm passionate about what I'm doing, want to do a great job. As you can tell, I get all consuming. And I'll, when I started to understand that our current CEO at the time, Mike, was going to be retiring, I had been really happy in my COO job. I felt like it was doing a great job. It was a bit challenging. I certainly was still learning and there was always new things to do. But then I all of a sudden I had this moment where I thought, man, if it's not he's not here and it's not me, it's gonna be like one of these guys. And I'm looking around the team, and not that there's nothing wrong with any of these guys personally, but I thought, I'm I would be better than this person. I would be better than this person. Because I really did, all of a sudden I realized I am actually the most qualified person in the room to take this next step. And so it sounds silly perhaps even, but that actually wasn't obvious to me until I got it through my thick head. Once I decided that was what I was going to do, I got really intentional about it. I leaned in to building even stronger one-to-one relationships with our board members, our directors of the company, because ARC is industry owned. I knew almost all of these board members superficially as customers, maybe deeply as customers, some, but some not. I didn't have a relationship with at all. So I spent a lot of time, went out and met with them all personally, wanted to make sure I really understood what they were trying to achieve. I knew them in the ARC world, but I really wanted to get to know them better. So that was something I did. I had that really intentional development plan that I mentioned to you earlier. And I got an executive coach. And probably the most important person in my career success is this executive coach. I worked with her while I was developing my succession capabilities and getting ready for the next job. And I worked with her for the last couple of years when I got into this job. I was a new CEO, it's a new role. Absolutely critical resource for me. And then the other person that's really been important to me is the chairman of our board, who is a woman, Bonnie Wrights. Didn't really know her that well until I got closer to this job. And I knew that was a relationship I needed to build. And she's just become an incredibly important person in my life, personally and professionally.
Thank you for deconstructing that path in such a clear way for us, Laura, because I do think thinking about people that are going to be the decision makers, working on the relationship engagement and understanding what they wanted to achieve, and then really looking at what you needed to develop in terms of internal skills and building a very intentional plan around that. I think that's excellent advice. And I think it's something that many of us could take on at any point in our career in terms of that next career step. But I really thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable in terms of making the decision and then building a plan to go after it.
And
So
if I might just add one more thing, I was obviously a strong internal candidate, but I believed that the board would and likely should have taken a look externally as well. And so I decided for my own well-being, one of the things I needed to do was be ready to not get the job. And to and so I did start to look for, okay, what other cool things could I do with my career? I started thinking about leading a nonprofit. I live in the DC area. There's tons of amazing nonprofits around here. And I needed to be able to feel that myself and communicate to them. Hey, if this doesn't happen, I'll be fine, but I won't be here. I needed it for myself, but I also think it was important that they knew as they were considering their decision that I if I didn't get the job, I wouldn't be here.
Again, thank you for being so and so powerful in your decisioning in terms of allowing us all to understand that. Because again, I think others sometimes need to hear the strength of what you brought to the table in the end, leveraging your negotiation, your strength, but also having a plan B. So thank you for that. We're coming up near the end of the interview, Lauri, but there's two things I was hoping. One is really work-life balance. And you started the
Hmm.
conversation about being a single mom, but all leaders struggle with
Hmm.
all of the demands of workplaces upon them, the hard work that you referenced earlier in terms of the career journey commitment. But I'm wondering if there's anything you can share in terms of how you have intentionally managed some of those demands, being a parent, all the
Yeah.
work you do, and all of your other jobs.
I feel like for most of your questions, I've had a really great answer, but this is one that I honestly haven't done really well with, and especially in earlier parts of my life where I was ambitious, really committed, and yet a parent of younger. I have two sons, they're grown men now, who like to remind me on a regular basis about all the times that I wasn't there for them. But then I remind them, like, hey, look at my job now. Look at, we get to do a lot of really cool things as a family because I can afford to take us. But if I could go back to my younger self, I would not probably change my commitment or my ambition, but I would probably ask myself more often, with really force myself, like, how important is this? Because there were periods of time in my career where I thought everything was important. And I look at it back now and I think, I can't even remember why we even did that. Maybe ask yourself a little bit more, is this, how important is this? Should I really be sacrificing my evening or my weekend for this? Or is this something that I don't have to be you don't have to be a superstar around everything that you do. So picking and choosing a bit more would be my advice. But when I finally did figure out that if I didn't take better care of myself, I wasn't going to make it, I really developed a habit over the last several years, of making sure I take at least two chunks of time off a year for a vacation, one for family, one for like friends. You have to put that time in the calendar and honor it, and don't let anything get in that way. And if you do that, at least you've got a couple of, and then there's, of course, we all have some holidays here and there. You'll be able to give yourself enough R&R to create that kind of balance. So that's my best advice, but I think it's still a work in progress for me sometimes.
If I may, Lauri, I just want to thank you so much for being vulnerable, for sharing so many personal elements of your career journey. I also want to congratulate you because I know you're going to receive next week one of the Women LGBTA Top Women in our Industry Award. And you have been a trailblazer and you just bring so much intellectual capital, but you also bring this warmth in terms of
Mm.
your career journey that I just truly admire. So
Thank you.
I thank you for sharing that and for showing others the way forward. And I also thank you for your strength in terms of how you have carved your career out and how you have empowered others to see that way and support teammates on their journeys. Thank you for the wisdom. I know that our audience will very much appreciate what you had to share with us today.
Thank you, Dorothy. It was a real pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. And if I may also say thank you to our audience. And if you have enjoyed this interview with Lauri, I hope you'll also come to our website because there are many other TBI advisors like Lauri that you can learn from on our webcasts and podcasts that I know will really empower your knowledge and your spirit. I hope to see you there, Lauri. Thank you again
Thank you.
for taking the time with us today. And again, congratulations. And I look forward to celebrating your win in terms of getting recognized. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.